All right, let's get right into it. We're going to dive into one of the biggest questions we face today. How in the world do we build a food system that can feed all of us without completely trashing the planet? Well, Europe has a plan for that, and we're going to break it down. But first, let's get a handle on just how big this problem really is. The starting point for this whole conversation is, well, it's pretty sobering. The way we produce, process, and eat our food right now just isn't working for the long haul. It's this incredibly complex system that's tied into our health, our economies, and the environment. And right now, that entire system is creaking under the strain. So let's start with the climate. Our food systems are responsible for somewhere between 23 and 42% of all global greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, think about that. In some estimates, that's more than every car, truck, plane, and ship in the world combined. It's just a staggering number that covers everything from the farm right to your fork. And it's not just what we're putting into the atmosphere. The food system has a massive footprint on the planet itself. Right now, we are using about a third of the world's entire land surface and an incredible 3/4 of all its fresh water for agriculture. That is just an immense amount of pressure on our natural world. Okay, so after all that land, all that water, all that energy, here's a number that's really tough to swallow. The UN figures that 14% of all the food we produce globally gets lost before it even gets a chance to hit a store shelf. It just vanishes somewhere between the harvest and the supermarket. Poof, gone. So the problem is big, it's complicated, and it's definitely urgent. In response to all this, the European Commission has put together this really comprehensive framework to guide the kind of change we so desperately need. It's called Food 2030, and it's basically Europe's blueprint for the future of food. At its heart, Food 2030 is what's called a research and innovation policy. So this isn't just another set of rules and regulations. It's actually a strategic plan to invest in the science, the tech, and the ideas that are going to create the solutions we need. The goal is a food system that just works. One that's good for the planet, can handle shocks like climate change, is nutritious for all of us, and is fair for everyone involved in making it happen. Now, what's really cool is the philosophy behind this whole plan. This image here is called the SDG wedding cake, and it's a brilliant way to visualize the core idea. It shows that our economy and our society aren't separate things floating above nature. No way. They are completely embedded within the biosphere, totally dependent on it. You simply cannot have a healthy economy or stable society without a healthy planet. And that idea right there is the foundation for the entire Food 2030 approach. Okay, so with that big picture thinking in mind, how does this plan actually work? I mean, how do you take this huge vision and turn it into something real? The answer is you break a massive problem down into concrete, manageable pieces. Food 2030 does this using a series of pathways for change. And here is the roadmap. This shows us the 11 different pathways, and each one targets a critical piece of the food system puzzle. You can think of these as the different fronts in the battle for a sustainable food future. And the key idea is that any solution, whether it's a new kind of protein or a better way to farm in cities, has to deliver benefits across 4 key areas: our health, the climate, the economy, and our communities. Let's zoom in on a few of these to see what that looks like in the real world. Let's kick things off with one of the most talked about areas in food innovation right now. How do we actually reinvent what we put on our plates to make it more sustainable? And that brings us to pathway number 4, alternative proteins. This is all about finding new and better ways to get our protein beyond the usual suspects of meat and dairy. We're talking about everything from plants and fungi to microbes and even things like cultured meat grown in a lab. And the why behind this is so powerful. On one hand, the livestock industry alone is responsible for about 14.5% of global greenhouse gases, not to mention the links to certain diseases. But then you look at the opportunity side. Wow. Just by shifting our diets, we could provide a full 1/5 of the climate action we need to hit our global warming targets. And what that means is new businesses, new jobs, and a healthier population. It's a huge win-win. Of course, it's not as simple as just flipping a switch. The hurdles are real. Making these new foods at scale can be expensive, the regulations for them are still being figured out, and hey, building consumer trust takes time. And that is exactly where a plan like Food 2030 steps in. It aims to provide the enablers, things like targeted funding, support for new businesses, and smart policies to help clear those hurdles and speed up the change. So changing what we produce is one giant piece of the puzzle. But what about all the food we already have? An equally important part of this whole thing is tackling the massive problem of food waste. Now, the plan makes a really important distinction here. You have food that is lost, which is that 14% we talked about that never even makes it from the farm to the store. But then you have food that's wasted, which happens at the end of the chain, in our shops and in our own homes. And in the EU alone, that adds up to another 10% of the food supply. The scale of this challenge is just mind-blowing. The amount of land we use to grow food that just gets thrown away is an area larger than the entire country of China. Just think about that for a second. But the opportunity is just as massive. The EU is taking this so seriously that it's actually proposed legally binding targets to force countries to cut food waste. Doing that doesn't just help the planet, it makes our entire food system stronger and more secure. So why on earth do we waste so much? Well, the reasons are baked into the system. The true environmental cost of that wasted food isn't reflected in its price. The incentives are all misaligned. A farmer doesn't really feel the pain if a supermarket throws their produce away. And, of course, our own habits play a huge part. So the solutions have to be systemic, too. Policies that promote a circular economy, social innovations that change our behaviors, and way better data to track where and why the waste is happening in the first place. Okay, for our last spotlight, let's look at something that sounds a bit like science fiction, but it's very real. It's a pathway that could change everything from the soil under our feet to our own health. We're talking about the microbiome world. This is all about tapping into the invisible power of microorganisms. Now, the challenge here is that this is really cutting-edge science. It's incredibly complex, and it's going to take major investment to unlock all its secrets. But the potential payoff is truly transformative. For farms, we're talking about microbes that can act as natural fertilizers and pesticides, reducing our need for chemicals. And inside our own bodies, understanding our gut microbiome could completely revolutionize how we think about nutrition and preventing disease. So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, for sustainability, it means healthier farms with fewer chemicals. For our nutrition, it could lead to personalized health advice based on our unique gut ecosystems. And for the economy, it opens up this whole new world of innovation and jobs in biotech, agriculture, and healthcare. It's a perfect example of how really deep research can create this huge ripple effect of benefits. So, we've looked at alternative proteins. We've looked at food waste. We've even peeked into the microbiome world. What you start to see is that these aren't just separate efforts. They all work together to achieve what Food 2030 calls co-benefits. And this, right here, is the endgame. This is what it is all for. We're aiming for a system that actively makes us healthier, that works with our climate instead of against it, that creates a circular economy where nothing is wasted, and that sparks innovation to make our communities stronger. Each one of those pathways we looked at helps push us toward all four of these goals at the same time. You know, this isn't just some technical plan, it's a mission. And this quote from the European Commissioner really captures that ambition perfectly. The goal here is for Europe to lead a global shift, to set an example for a food future that is both sustainable for the planet and, really importantly, just for its people. So the plan is on the table. The pathways are all mapped out, the research is happening as we speak. Food 2030 really does provide this detailed, ambitious blueprint for change. The final question, for policymakers, for innovators, and really for all of us, is a simple one. What are we going to build with it?